The announcement of the Western New York Council was quickly criticized by the Alliance for a Greater New York for not including enough diversity. The Alliance is actually a coalition of government watchdogs, unions, and community groups. Its members say that the economic councils need to include more representatives from labor and small businesses in order to best serve their respective regions. Now, joining me now from Buffalo to explain more about all this is Allison Duwe. She is the executive director for the Coalition for Economic Justice. Allison, thanks very much for being with us.
Thank you.
So you say that there needs to be more diversity. There are some people on these councils, and we've seen 3 of them announced today, who do represent the areas that you are discussing, just not enough. Is that your opinion?
I think I'd first say, that we're heartened that the rollout of the regional councils does appear to be more than just the usual suspects, and that there was intent put into ensuring that labor and community groups had some representation. I think if you look at the makeup and from what we can tell thus far with the 3 that were announced, it's by far not balanced or majority representation from community interests and labor interests, though they will have a voice, and I think that's going to be important.
Are you concerned that they will be drowned out by some of the bigger fish? I mean, you've got some pretty heavy hitters on here, and you also have some people who played a role in the Committee to Save New York, which was a pro-business entity, as we've mentioned, that actually spent almost $10 million to boost the governor and his policies during the legislative session. So those people already know him pretty well, and they're powerful in their own right.
Yes. I also think we have to keep in mind what we saw in the legislative session and what we know and what we heard from the governor in terms of why we're getting these regional councils. So we completely agree we need good jobs. We need good jobs now. We would say, however, that the way to go about doing that isn't to continue business as usual. So the governor mentioned today that economic development's broken, but what he didn't mention is whether or not the regional councils are going to address the failures of so many of our existing programs. And I think there are, as you pointed out, some very strong interests that have been appointed to these councils who would prefer to maintain the status quo, and likely who already have pretty clear ideas about what they're going to drive forward in these regional councils.
And actually, the governor's idea here is to pit the councils against one another in a little bit of like friendly competition, if you will. Do you think that that is actually beneficial because it ensures that the best man or woman or project, if you will, wins?
I mean, I think we'll have to see how that plays out to a degree, but I think we should very much keep in mind that there are 10 regions, and only 4 of them are going to get the big prize of $40 million at the end of the day.
Right.
And I think that the numbers in the governor's announcements today were a little confusing. He keeps touting the $1 billion figure, but really the regional councils and in the budget this year were only allocated $130 million in new money. The $1 billion is money that already exists in state agency coffers, and we hope will be doled out in a more coordinated fashion in line with these strategic plans. But it's not new money, and it's a very small fraction of what we spend in the state of New York on economic development.
So in a best-case scenario, then, what would it look like going forward for you? How would these regional councils that we're starting to get a picture of, how will they operate in the best-case scenario?
Best case scenario, which is going to be tough under the time constraints, right? They have to deliver their plans by November 14th.
Right.
But I think the working groups that have been discussed as being set up offer some real opportunities for voices that don't usually have a seat at the table. The governor's intention to travel around the state and really listen is an opportunity. But I think who gets appointed and how the chairman's council is structured, as well as the strategic plan committee, right? There are 2 other bodies here in addition to the 7 more councils that all need to be announced.
It's a little confusing.
So a lot of details.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, though, I mean, as the governor has said, would you disagree with the governor's characterization of economic development in New York as broken?
Not at all.
You wouldn't? Okay.
Totally broken.
Okay.
We have, but again, sort of concerned that the regional councils aren't going to address the big mess, and that is our sprawling and fractured economic development programs that spend $8 billion a year, mostly through tax breaks to businesses. And we haven't seen good jobs created as a result.
Right.
And the regional councils to date haven't talked about addressing that problem.
Well, right, not yet. I mean, they're just getting off the ground. But certainly, I mean, we have seen this has been highlighted time and time again, if not just recently by the state comptroller, who says just a small slice of economic development from the industrial development agencies, which give out these tax incentives and then say, okay, I'm going to create 20 jobs, and then, you know, you create just one, if that, and you still nevertheless get your tax breaks. That's the kind of stuff that you're talking about?
Correct. So definitely fearing that those programs aren't part of the sort of vision or scope of the council's agenda, and feeling like that's a problem, as well as saying, well, are we really learning from those mistakes? Are these councils really ready to adopt policies or put forward strong performance criteria that really stress our environment and the creation of quality jobs?
Well, what you're talking about there, the environment versus business, is sort of an age-old conflict, isn't it? I mean, this idea of establishing a state in which you protect the environment and business can thrive is threading a needle that I think elected officials have been struggling with for, like, ever, haven't they?
Yeah, along with putting any standards in place with regard to if public investments or tax breaks are given to a business, should there be requirements on what kind of business that is and what type of job that business is going to create in our community.
That's interesting.
So, you know, we've seen Lexus car dealerships and doctors' offices in Western New York get tax breaks.
Do you not? So you don't believe that those sort of businesses should get tax breaks? I mean, for example, what kind of businesses? They should be businesses that are more focused on, for lack of a better word, a progressive agenda?
I think businesses that, A, can live up to their commitments to create jobs, B, that those are jobs that will pay folks a livable wage so that they're not on additional public assistance in addition to the tax break that the taxpayers are funding, that don't exacerbate environmental problems, right, so that don't feed into sprawl and therefore, again, need additional taxpayer money to support maintaining and building additional infrastructure.
Yeah, well, it is certainly going to be interesting. I mean, do you guys have representation on the Western New York Council?
We have folks that we know and have worked closely with, so we're definitely eager to partner with them and be part of the conversation with the regional councils and see what types of opportunities there are there to advance some new thinking about how we do economic development. Okay.
Well, certainly, as you mentioned, the time frame is actually pretty short. I mean, we're looking for a planning process that ends in November 14th. It's not a lot of time. Obviously, the administration's been pretty hard charging up until this point, so it'll be interesting to see what develops. In the meantime, we'll touch base with you again, I'm sure, when that comes out. I want to thank you very much, Allison Duwe. It's been great talking to you.
Thank you so much.